So I don't know anyone who's more qualified. He has, as I said, he has the educational background, he has the work ethic par excellence, he has the knowledge of this province, he understands community, he relates to people, and in my opinion, he ought to be the next Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador. So it's my pleasure now to introduce him to you, and he'll talk for a little bit. God knows what about. I'm seeing some things up here that I don't really know what he's going to talk about, actually. But he'll have fun chatting with you, and we'll have fun listening. Do we need more chairs?
No, we're good.
We're good, because I went out to the other area. They only had 6 people show up out there. We should have the big room and take their chairs. But they said come back and get more chairs if you want them. They brought them in. Okay.
Thank you, Susan. And normally, thank you everybody for coming out. And Susan wasn't kidding when she said she was going to organize an event here in Grand Falls-Windsor for me. This is perhaps one of the bigger events that I've seen and attended so far. I've been traveling across the province and up to Labrador. And normally I spend a lot of time for the first 20 minutes talking about myself and where I came from and where I've been. And Susan's done a little bit of that. But clearly for me, coming back here is like coming home. As Susan alluded to, I moved here in 1994. I started my career in St. John's, and in 1990 I had an opportunity to take a position in Clarenville, and at the time that I did, I was coaching one men's basketball team and just put them back in the AUS, and I was working at the Department of Health, and a job came up in Clarenville, and I remember I told a bunch of my friends that I was going to do that, and I was going to move to Clarenville, and they looked at me and said, "Are you crazy?" And to be honest, moving out of St. John's was the best thing that ever happened to me from a personal point of view, and certainly career-wise. And then I was there from 90 to 94. In 94, health was being restructured, and they were going from 25 health authorities down to 8. And so an organization called Central West Health Corporation was established, which took in Lewisports and Springdales and Bayverts and Harbour Breton and others. And I had the good fortune of applying for a position here and getting it, and then got to spend the next 10 years here in Grand Falls-Windsor, and didn't regret 1 minute of it. As Susan said, we raised our kids here. I got to coach some basketball here. Heavy lobbying by a gentleman sitting down there by the name of Mr. Blackmore. And but I got to tell you, quick story, the last time I was in Grand Falls-Windsor and was in front of a crowd like this, it was at the Arts and Culture Center, and back then the Red Cross used to put off what they call No Talent Nights. And myself and Rob Bragg, who were sitting in the front, were part of the No Talent section. But we did have a little skit, and we both dressed up identical, and he was my puppet, and I was and I literally had him in a trunk on the stage, and I still remember all we had to do was when I opened the trunk and Rob jumped out and sat on my knee, we didn't say anything. We just stood there and we all laughed for about 2 minutes, and then we left. But it was quite the crowd, and from here I did go to St. John's. I did go into partnership with another gentleman on some KFC franchises, and after a period of about 4 years, I sold my shares in that and went back to work with the Department of Health as an assistant deputy minister. And I was there until 2012 when the job opening came up in Grenfell Health looking for a president and CEO. And once again I applied for that and was lucky enough to get it. And same reaction, of course, from the people in St. John's. Well, you're going to Labrador. And my comment was simple, is that I'm going to get to go to Labrador. And I'm going to get to see everything it has to offer, and they're going to pay me to do it. And they said it was a pretty good gig. And so my contract finished up in July 31st of this year. And my wife is from Stephenville. Her parents still live out there. They're aging, so she wanted to move back home. So we actually moved back to Stephenville, and Kippens actually bought a house out on the West Coast, so that's where we're living to now. And I didn't stay, I guess, relaxed for a long time, perhaps a month or so, when a few phones started ringing, and I was asked about throwing my name out for the leadership, and after lots of thought and pondering and talking to a number of people, I said, why not? So here I am. So again, why Tony Wakeham? For me, I think as a why do I want to do this? I guess like over 61% of the population right now are dissatisfied with the current administration. I mean, that was the latest poll, and I think I'm one of those people. You know, when the government gets elected on a commitment to do one thing and then does the complete opposite, then I don't think we simply reward them by giving them a second term. You know, never in the history of our province have we ever defeated a government after one term. We've never done it. It's always been, everybody's always been at least 2 terms. What I'm suggesting is now is the time. Now is the time for this province to make history. You know, this government doesn't deserve your support for a second term. Their whole way forward document is simply to look backward and blame. And they've been doing that for about 3 years now, blaming previous administrations. People are tired of that. People are tired of blamers. They want fixers. And so I think the PC party has an opportunity to really take that role on. Right now we're second in the polls, but clearly the people of the province want an alternative. We have to be the ones to give them that. We have to be the party to provide that. And that means it starts with strong leadership. And why do I think I'm the best leader for the job? For some of the reasons that Susan pointed out. I come from a wide variety of different backgrounds. I've lived and worked all over this province of ours, from the East Coast to Central to the West Coast to northern parts of it. And I've seen and met with lots of great people. And that's one of the advantages, I guess, of moving around so much, you know, when you're in your career. And I've been very fortunate to be able to do it all while living here in the province. But, you know, you meet a lot of exceptional people along the way, and there's a lot of them here in this room that I've met and in my 10 years here, and I'm really glad to be back. But to me, a leader has to be about someone who could build that team. I've been leading since all my life, whether it was on the basketball floor, whether it was in the boardroom, or whether it was at work. I've been that leader. I've been able to bring teams together. I've been part of great teams. I know what it is and what's needed. And it simply can't be about the leader. If we're really going to have an impact in the next election in 2019 and knock off the Liberal Party, we're going to need a team to do it. I'll tell you a quick story about a time I was with Basketball Canada. Excuse me, and I interviewed Hubie Brown. Hubie Brown was a former NBA coach, and he's currently a commentator on NBA games now. And we interviewed him to be the head coach of our national team. At the time, we had the coach had retired, and we were looking for a new one. And when we went in the interview process, he simply looked at us. It wasn't about us interviewing him, it was him interviewing us. And he looked and he said, "Who do you have?" That was the only thing he was concerned about. It wasn't about the salary, it wasn't about the length of the contract. He said, "Who do you have?" He wanted to know what players did Canada have available to them that could represent Canada in qualifying for the Olympics, because he was not interested in coaching if we didn't have the players. And so, in a nice, polite way, he knew everybody we had. He knew every kid that was playing in the NCAA at the time. In a nice, polite way, he turned us down. But what I'm saying that for is because while the leader is critical, or the coach is critical, it becomes important that that team that's on the floor, or that's in every single district, those are the keys to winning the election. So yes, the leader has the lead, but in order to take back this government, we're going to need to identify people who are willing to step up and say, yes, we can. And that means finding another 39 people besides myself who are willing to do that. And no, it's not about, well, they're going to automatically get reelected. They only automatically get reelected if we allow that to happen. But they have enough, I guess, said one thing, done another, and it's time for us to say enough's enough, and to give them an alternative, to give the people of the province an alternative. So that's why, you know, I ran. That's why I think I'm the best candidate. I will build those teams. I will make my government about people, not against them, work with them, not against them. And in doing that, one of the platforms that I've announced, I guess, have talked about is some democratic reform. There's a couple of items I brought up. One of them is that simply says, from now on, if any government or party wants to sell off any of our major assets or enter into any major contracts that are going to commit this province for decades to come, then they need to go back to the people. That can be either by a plebiscite, a referendum, it could be binding or non-binding. But at the end of the day, the people of the province deserve to say yay or nay. That's going to be critical in the very near future. I truly believe that, because sooner than later, long before 2041, the Upper Churchill contract will be renegotiated. It's not going to wait until 2041. I predict that that will be done within the next 10 years or sooner. Why? Because big industry in Quebec, especially the aluminum smelting companies, want to know that they have stable electricity rates. Upper Churchill has 5,600 megawatts that we're currently selling to Quebec. Over the last 40 years, the Quebec government, I believe the numbers are something like, they have reaped $27 billion, and the province of Newfoundland and Labrador has gotten 2. That's the discrepancy. That's got to change, obviously, and will change. We should never, ever settle for anything like that. But here's the kicker. Quebec is developing one more river. It has about 1,500 megawatts of power. They do not have enough power to provide to those smelting companies, those aluminum companies, without the Upper Churchill. So, do we have that potential? Yes, we do. Are we bankrupt? As we've all heard, no, we're not. Last time I heard, you had to have total liabilities exceed total assets in order to be bankrupt. We're nowhere near bankrupt. And that's just one example of an asset we have that we better not give it away again. We better get it right. And I think there's a real opportunity there to do that. We have the Gull Island project. It's not started. But before I left Goose Bay, all that site is cleared. Everything is cleared, and the rumor mill, of course you can believe that, has, as soon as the Muskrat Falls project is finished, they're going to move all that infrastructure down to the Gull Island site, and they'll look at somebody to develop that. Should we do it? Not a chance. But should we enter into an agreement with someone to develop it? Sure we should. And we should take royalties from it forever and ever and ever. But again, it's a huge asset we have. So I get upset when people tell us, or when I read in the paper about the former finance minister from Saskatchewan saying how the federal government's going to have to bail out Newfoundland because all the other provinces of Canada are going to be impacted if they don't. Not true. Not true. So the other one that comes up to mind when you talk about that, of course, is there's a fear that the Liberal government has allowed, in my opinion, to foster in this province, which has dragged everybody down. It's dragging down people all over this province. So that is the concept that your electricity rates will double because of Muskrat Falls. Your electricity rates do not have the double. As a matter of fact, they only double if the government does nothing. Now maybe the Liberals have a plan which they don't want to talk about yet because it's too early. Come 2019, I'm sure we'll all be saved with our own money and we won't have to worry about that. But right now, nobody is talking about it. And it isn't fair. It isn't fair. You know, government has an opportunity. They can make adjustments. They can do different things with the revenue that's available to them. But they have that option. But they're not telling you. They're not telling the people of this province. And people are worried, and genuinely so. So, you know, there are lots of revenues available. There's the government's return on equity investment that's built into the Muskrat Falls rates, 8.4%. Government could say to Nalcor, by the way, Nalcor is owned by everyone sitting in this room. We are the owners of Nalcor. We decide how they invest their money. We decide at the end of the day where their dividends go. We need to make those decisions. And that's where the government can simply turn around, take that 8.4%, say, nope, don't charge that to the taxpayers. you reduce the rates by that amount. There are other options from sales and other revenues, but they're there. It's what my message is, but they're not telling you that they're there. They're not telling anybody, but let's watch. Let's watch and see what happens in the next little while and see if something magic happens in this budget or if they wait until next budget to do it. So, but it's all part of, you know, their plan, I guess, or lack of planning. They simply want to blame. And right now, that's a great one to tag on, to say, oh, that's the party that gave you Muskrat Falls. And they've continued to do that. I'm not going to stand up and say I'm not worried about the cost of Muskrat Falls. Sure I am. I think we're all concerned about the fact that the costs have gone up so much. And we want to know why. And that's what an inquiry will do, hopefully. Hopefully we'll understand what the business plan was when the board of Nalcor sanctioned the development of Muskrat Falls. What was it they were looking at? What were the options presented to them? Legitimate questions that hopefully will get answered. We also need to worry about why have costs risen so much. Let's do the audit. Let's find out so we all understand. Let's stop the rhetoric and let's get to the facts. But at the same time, I can't stop Muskrat Falls, nor can anybody else in this room. It's done. It's going to develop. Electricity will flow. Now we need to worry to make sure that individual taxpayers of this province don't wind up paying for the capital cost. And my message is government has options and they should take them. So we'll see where that goes in the next little while. One of the other biggest challenges, of course, with this current government is when it comes to expenditures and revenues. We all know we got an expenditure problem. We can all say, yay, we got an expenditure problem. But it's one thing to have an expenditure problem, and then it's another thing to say, we got to increase taxes. So they go out and they increase taxes, and a good many people in this room are probably paying an occupancy tax right now. They call it a levy. I call it an occupancy tax. If you live in Newfoundland and Labrador, you've got to pay a tax to live here. And that's not just not right. But what makes the matters worse is that not only did they increase taxes, over 300 fees went up, but they increased expenditure at the same time. Maybe if they had said, no, we're not going to increase expenditure, maybe, just maybe, we might say, okay, they had to do that. But you can't sock it to people and then increase expenditure. So my fiscal plan will be to freeze expenditure. Simply start off by freezing it. So if we're spending $8 billion today, we spend $8 billion next year. And what are we going to have to do? We're going to have to rearrange that funding. So if there are things that aren't working, reallocate the money. If we need money for new things, no different than any business would have to do, find it. You just simply can't keep simply taxing a shrinking tax base. They say we don't have a revenue problem in this province because our revenues per capita are as good as any in the country. Well, that's okay if you like paying the highest taxes in the country, but I don't think that's the right way. I think if we really want to change this model, it's not about increasing the taxes on the number of people that are currently paying them. It should simply be, and it's not simple, but it should be about increasing the tax base. We should have more people paying less tax. But that means that you've got to go out and start talking about business. And talking about businesses and allowing them to make profit. Profit is not a bad word. But you can't turn around on the one hand and say you want to stimulate the economy and smack businesses outside with all of these rates and increases. And I'm not saying that we're going to go out and just roll over and give business everything they want. But I do believe that you have to incentivize them. Government should create the opportunities. It's up to business to create the jobs. And I believe that there are ways of doing that. I mean, we have a payroll tax in this province. It's been around for a while. Depending on the size of your business, the more people you hire, the more tax you pay. That's a regressive tax. Maybe what we should be saying to business is the more people you hire, the less tax you pay on a payroll tax. Whether you're a small business or a large business, we can set it up in a way that as a percentage of it, if you increase your number of full-time employees by 20%, maybe you get a savings on the other end. Because there is an economic formula there that simply says the more full-time jobs that are created, that already creates other stimulus in the economy. They all pay taxes. They all buy goods and services. And so, yeah, on the one hand, you may be giving a break to a business that's doing this on this side, but if you're creating full-time jobs over here, then that offsets it, and it'll more than offset it. But you gotta be willing to sit down and work out those things. So I guess what I'm saying to you is that we need to turn around and make sure we look at all those opportunities and not simply be stuck talking about an increased taxes on what is a very shrinking tax base. I'll do a couple of other quick things and then we can ask questions, because I don't know about anybody else, but it's awful hot in here.
You're right under those lights, Tony.
Yeah. And, but I just want to talk about a couple of little quick snappers of education. Let's talk. There's lots of opportunity in education, and I really believe that there needs to be a healthy discussion on that one as well. But I'll talk briefly about this idea about a tuition freeze. So last year again, the minister, I think it was Jerry Byrne at the time, stood up with great fanfare and announced that tuitions are frozen at Memorial again for another year, and everybody applauded. But then the university turned around and slapped every student with a $50 fee for, I think it was something called maintenance fee or something like that. But here's the kicker. So if you had a daughter or son going to university and they were doing 10 courses a year, or that amounts to $500. Your tuition, or that a student pays, can be claimed on your income tax, either by the parent or by the student. This $50 a fee per course, $500, could not. You would have been better off if the university had this increased tuition by $500. At least you could have claimed it on your income tax. So there are simple things like that that we just got to get, stop the nonsense, stop the politics. And of course for me, and the last one I'll speak about is health. I've spent my entire life in the healthcare system, and we are spending, everybody says, you know, we have the highest cost per capita in the country, we're 40% of the budget. But when they say we're at the highest cost per capita in the country, what does that mean? What does it really mean? Like we have to really start digging down into that and look at the data and understand what that means. I mean, you can't turn around, and I've seen this all my life, I guess, and not just Liberals, BC governments in the past as well, so I'm not taking sides. But you can't turn around and have health reform as part of a budget process. Too many times, health authorities or others will, after a budget, will go out to communities that they all operate in and say, we're changing a service delivery, or we're closing this, or we're doing something different. And nobody knows anything about it. Why? Because it was all part of a secret budget process that you couldn't tell anybody. You just had to wait until the government had made some announcements on budget day. That has to change. That has to change. $3 billion enough? Yes, it is. Do we have a supply and demand problem? Yes, we do. We need to be honest with ourselves. There's 500,000 of us. And we need to be truly honest with ourselves and say, yes, we need to readjust. We need to take a look at it. You know, everybody wants change, but nobody wants to change. That has become the problem. So now we need, though, to focus on the individual and not on the bricks and mortar. So we need to talk to people in their communities, and we need to truly use the data that we have and talk about needs. There's 3 questions you can ask yourself. 1, what do you want? 2, what do you need? 3, what can you afford? Now, if the answer to all 3 is the same, great. But in a lot of cases, I might want to drive an SUV. What I really need is something to get me from point A to point B. What I can afford is a subcompact. So we have to be realistic about that. But if we focus on the individual and focus on the community and truly look at what the needs of the people are, and we build a system up from that perspective, then we could talk about, once we identify the need, then we could talk about who the provider should be. Whether we need a nurse practitioner, whether we need a diabetic educator, whether we need a physician. You know, we have Minister of Health in there now, and he's got the NLA going off on a tangent, upset with him. He's got the nurses union upset with him. We don't need that. What we need is people working, and for me, back to community health, back to primary health care. And the other and only commitment I've made on health care, financial commitment I've made in my entire campaign, has to do with one part of health care, which is a simple one in one sense, but expensive for some people, and that's the Medical Transportation Assistance Program. Because I truly believe, whether you live 5 miles or 500 miles, if you've got to travel for health care, government should pick up the tab. We know we can't have a tertiary care center in every single community in this province. We've got one, it's in St. John's. It's going to be in St. John's, it ain't moving. We can't replicate it everywhere. What we can do is make sure that if you've got to travel, that we can do a better job of coordinating your appointments, that we can do a better job and make sure that when you go, you don't have to worry about paying for it. Well, let me give you an example in Labrador. I had a family that had, this lady had to go out for a specialist appointment, flying to St. John's. The fly from Goose Bay to St. John's return is $1,000. So they go out, they see the specialist. Specialist orders a test. So they walk down the quarter at the Health Science Center to the department where the test is offered. Say, I'm here for the test. Oh no, we can't give you the test today. We give you an appointment 2 weeks from now. So they fly home. 2 weeks later, they fly down again, another $1,000. And here they sit, and they get the test done, and they expect to see the specialist to find out what the results of the test would be within 24 to 48 hours. The results are there that quick. They go down, no, you can't see the specialist, you're going to have to come back because the earliest we can get you in is 2 weeks from now. They fly back up to Labrador again and come down for the third time. $3,000 for one intervention with the healthcare system. That's the kind of stuff that's got to change. As healthcare administrators, and I was one, we got to do a better job on that stuff. There's no reason for that to be happening. None. But I think for healthcare in particular, it's got to be about the need. And it's got to be based on what the data and the evidence is telling us. There's an old saying that says, in God we trust, everybody else requires data. and I think if we keep ourselves to those types of things and keep it honest with people, then I think we can build better outcomes. We can have better results. We know our results are not very good. We know we're spending a lot of money, but we need to change it. But health reform shouldn't be about getting a call on a Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock with the 3 other CEOs of your health authorities and telling you you have to lay off 2 of your vice presidents and X percentage more of your managers and you got to have it done by Tuesday. That might be great politics. It's not health reform. So there's lots of ways of doing health reform, but that ain't it. So I think for me the message is, let's start. We don't do it to people, we do it with people. And we start from the ground up and build it. That's where I'm going to take healthcare in this province, and we will make a difference. There's an old saying as well from a former colleague of mine, Don Keats, who many of you would know. When I was here in Central, Don used to say, we will not fund the status quo. And so I think if we start with that principle, we can work our way through this. Thank you so much for coming out. I'm going to stop talking.
So we can open up the floor to any questions that you might have, comments, observations, issues.
If I don't know the answer, I'll tell you and I'll get it for you. I don't have all the answers. I know that, but that's why you need teams, and that's why you need people and that around you that can help you. Anybody?
I'll ask a question. It's regarding the mental health.
Yes.
That I know that there's a lot of issues on mental health, and they're trying to put things in place. But my thoughts are, or what are your thoughts on, I know we have a large increase of mental health or mental illness on children coming up through the school systems. There's not a lot of support for that in the school system, or even in the health field at all.
I think it's again one of those areas where we have a school system delivering programs, we have a health system delivering programs, and maybe we're not doing enough of communication. Most times when systems break down, it's because of lack of communication. But I will say that one of the other things I talked about here in democratic reform is in the House of Assembly is about the use of more all-party committees. I mean, the House got to be more than simply yakking at each other and talking to each other. It should be about the all-party committees. And the all-party committee on mental health and addictions was a good start. I mean, that was one that started with the NDP, and then it was taken, the PC party took it, and then the Liberals now are tasked with implementing it. But there are lots of opportunities, yeah. I mean, I can't say I know everything there is to know about it, but I've been reading them forward on that report in particular, and anxious to see how they're going to redevelop the Waterford Hospital. They're talking about making it a community-based model as opposed to building a great big infrastructure in St. John's. So we'll wait and see where that goes.
But the concern I had would be the young
Yes.
adults that are coming up. I've lived in Labrador myself.
Yep.
And just retired from there, and I know
It's huge.
there is huge problems.
It's a huge
and
issue.
There's no support there at all.
No.
But it's not just Labrador, it's
Nope.
across the island. And, they're starting to have young now with mental illness.
Yep.
Where's it gonna go for them?
Yeah, I think that the old model of, it has to change. I mean, can't simply, the inclusiveness of education has to, it's fine, it's a nice buzzword. What are we doing to make sure that it really happens? Are we putting the resources to it?
Tony, the province rolled out a survey a while back there on asking expatriates why they left here and how to get them back here. What's your thoughts on that?
Waste of money. They should know why people are leaving. It's got the highest tax rates in the country, and above other things. But I think that, in all seriousness, though, to your point, I think one of the challenges here is, like when we think about our college system and others too. I mean, you can't keep training people for jobs in Alberta. We got to turn around and start thinking about what kind of programs we're offered, where are the jobs to, and how do we increase them. Like, to me, it's simple. Like, if you got a startup company that started like Verifin, started off by a couple of real intelligent people in this province. They've got over 300 employees now. They want more, but they're not available. They say they have trouble getting employees. But as government, I should be saying to them, how do I get you to 400? Or if you're a company that's got 20 employees, how do I get you to 30? What kind of incentives can we put in place? One of the things, though, that they've done as well out in Saskatchewan, which I think is a good program, and is one of the things I haven't come out yet, but my position on it is simple, that I think it's something we should look at. If you graduate from any post-secondary institution in Saskatchewan, doesn't matter what it is, and you stay in Saskatchewan, you file your income tax in Saskatchewan, they will give you $2,000 a year tax-free up to 7 years, just to try and keep their graduates in their province. So it doesn't matter what you're working at, as long as you file an income tax. So I think those are different ways of looking at a problem, but I think the challenge is, traditionally we've got to build that base from an economic point of view in terms of businesses.
Tony, you certainly have some interesting ideas about healthcare. My field is education. I'm just wondering if maybe you could talk a little bit about some of your ideas for how we can help our education system.
Well, again, that's something that I haven't dug a lot into yet. We're still going to put out our policy on that one. But the inclusiveness is one aspect of it that we've talked about. And the other part of it is about the same thing. I simply believe you have to go and sit down with the people that are directly involved in the system and have that chat. Again, can't be simply about what do you want. It has to be about what do you need and what can we afford. And then I think if we take that approach, then we could do something about it, because education is a huge department. I mean, it's not as Not as big as health, but it's right up there.
I think communication is
Yeah,
key.
yeah.
Better use of
definitely.
data. Now, the data is there. Lots of people talk about data and how to use data,
Yeah.
but I don't think it's used as efficiently as it
Nope.
could be.
Yeah, in your background, you'd know that. Yeah, absolutely. I think that we've got we don't need a royal commission on healthcare to tell us what we need to do. I don't think we need a royal commission on anything to tell us what we got to do. I think we need to turn around and get down and do it. But that means you got to work with people, and you got to get out there, and you got to start ground up. I made a comment a while back on a little bit of press coverage anyway about this whole budget consultation process. You know, they turn around and come out and do budget consultations in January after the budgets have been passed in October. You know, seems like a waste of time. If you're really going to consult with people, you got to get out well ahead of that and have those chats. But I'm looking forward to sitting down and talking to a bunch of educators about their way and what they feel are the best things to do when it comes to education and moving that forward. I don't profess to have everything there is to know, but I certainly look forward. I'm getting a lot of advice from a lady to your right there.
Susan's actually a former colleague of mine from years ago.
No, I'm not that old.
Well, anyway, gang, listen, it's been a pleasure. Thank you all so much for coming out. If there's more questions, bring them up, or we can chat. Come and have some little lunch and some coffee and tea, and let's mingle and chat. We don't have to sit here.
I got a question for you.
Sure.
It's a little bit personal, but if for some unfortunate reason you don't win the nomination,
Yes.
are you committed to
Yes.
running the next general election?
Yes.
Okay. You
Yeah.
don't have to tell me the district, but
Oh, well, right now, the district that I would run in, it would be in Steamboat Port. That's where I'm currently living. Unless the other, and then, well, after that, who knows? Might we come back this way yet? I'm not gonna say no to anything. Given this crowd, I might just decide I wanna come back here. But no, I have been asked that question a lot, and my opponent's been asked that question. I'm not sure his answer was a one-word answer, but mine is.
So how does this vote work?
So technically, now, if you haven't already registered, you can't vote. But what it is, you had up until January 28th to register with the party as either a supporter or a member. So now they're making sure we don't repeat Ontario fiasco, first of all. And so they're starting to go through all of the people who have registered to ensure that they're in the right districts and they're registered, and then the process is by the end of March, they're going to send out ballots in the mail for the people who registered. And you have until, I think it's around the 25th of April sometime, Susan, I'm not sure.
2 to 3 week period, depending on when they get
That, and it'll all come prepackaged, so you just fill it outside and then put it back in the mail. And then they will start counting them, and I think it's the 27th, 28th of April.
They'll be counted on the 27th. On the 28th, there is sort of a mini meeting convention in St. John's, and it will be announced on the 28th in St. John's. Just want to point out that one of the things that we didn't know when we were registering people that we should make you aware of now is that in the process of voting, they have to have some way of validating that the person sending in the ballot, even though they've received it, and we've argued this point a little bit, we didn't get too far, and the legal minds here would understand this, that you have to, there will be 2 envelopes. In one envelope, you have to put a photocopied issuance of an ID, a picture ID, so that they can validate that you are in fact the person that received that. Then there's another envelope that goes inside of that where you put your ballot and you seal it. So the ballot that comes in goes off to the accounting firm. The other one is just to validate that you actually are registered, you are the person. If you have trouble in this district with getting a photocopy of your ID, call me and I'll find a way to get that done. Most people can run it off on their printers at home or something like that, but if you can't and you can't find a place to do that, call me and I'll get it done for you. But that's a bit of a wrinkle that we haven't been able to work out. And from a legal perspective, they're told that you have to have that too. You have to have that photocopied IDs.
there's,
Susan, is that photocopy of the ID described with ballots when they're ultimately?
Yes, yes.